Well, hello there. Welcome to The Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by the internet's two most enthusiastic horror podcasters, yes! And also gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com, of course. On this show, we discuss films on the Section 3 list related to the video nasties. We pair up our films every fortnight based on a theme. Lately, we've been quite good at sticking to that schedule. You can find out more information about all of our old podcasts, any of our podcasts, in fact, not just the old ones, over at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com, and you can subscribe on iTunes and via any podcatcher you might be using. We'll give you that information again and also tell you how you can get your feedback and comments over to us at the end of the show. So here we are. I am Chris Clayton. Of course, you know me. You also know the man who I regularly podcast with. Who's there?
This is Tom Elliott.
The internet's Tom Elliott. Host of the Twilight Zone podcast. Arguably the most popular man on the internet.
Arguably, yes. There's some arguments against that. Probably several.
Is there really? How have you been, my friend?
I'm good. It's been, bit of time off. Got a Twilight Zone podcast out there, which a few people will be happy about. Just been enjoying this week off, playing a bit of PlayStation, chilling out, catching up on some TV. So how about you?
Yeah, not as good as you. I haven't been having a great time lately. I've been quite unwell, having pains and migraines and shivers and shakes, and I must be coming down with something. So just been dealing with that. So I'm a little bit croaky now and again, and I'm not, I don't think my energy levels are as high as I'd like them to be, but I'm going to give it a good old go. Don't you worry. What have you been playing on the PlayStation, old boy?
Well, we've spoke about this game before, and it's in fitting with a horror podcast, but the game The Last of Us.
Oh, dear me. But Tom, it won't be any surprise to you because we've spoken about it privately, but my favourite game of all time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I know you held it in high regard. I didn't know it was that high regard, but I'll be honest with you, I can only play it for short bits at a time because it stresses me out too much, Right. It's like, I like a romp, I've been playing Infamous Second Son lately, and that's a bit of a romp. But The Last of Us, it's so harrowing, isn't it? And it's so nerve-wracking when you're trying to navigate a room full of zombies and those clicker things. It stresses me out. So sometimes...
Yeah, it's dark, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll start playing at night, and then I'll walk into a room and you can, you do that hearing thing and you can hear that there's loads of clickers about. And I just think, oh, fuck it, I'll play Minecraft for a bit instead, So it's going to be a bit of an ordeal, this one.
Oh no! I was hoping that you'd, it would grab you, because I personally think that the characters in that game, and it does fit into. I mean, it is a horror game more or less. It's made by Naughty Dog. This is not a gaming podcast, by the way, folks, but it's made by Naughty Dog. It's the same company that make the Uncharted games, which are very different. They are more of a romp, actually. If you pick up the Uncharted collection that just came out on PS4, Tom, I think you'll have a brilliant time with those. Those are very cinematic, but almost like action films that play out. But The Last of Us is fits into more of a horror mold, and I just think that the characters in it are some of the most brilliantly realised ones of any game I've ever played.
Yeah.
But it does. It's emotionally taxing for sure.
I'll stick with it though. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting a bit old. I remember, Resident Evil and stuff back in the day. I used to revel in all that stuff, but now it's just like, oh god, there's a room full of them. But I'll get there. Good
times. Well, I'm glad anyway that you're playing it, because like I say, it's after I played the first couple of hours, I thought, this is okay. I'm enjoying it. And by the end of it, I didn't want it to end because I didn't want to have to say goodbye to those characters. So it's an interesting experience. The more you get on with it, I'll be interested to see how, as the story develops, what you think of it. Maybe we'll revisit the subject again on a future episode.
Possibly, but the next month we got Fallout 4 coming out, and I know that me and you are going to be, digging into that one big time. So if there's a delay to the Strange and Deadly show, that'll probably be why.
It'll be on Tom's side because, yes, I mean, I'm going to dig into Fallout 4, but I'm going to wait a couple of months.
Oh, are you?
Which is, just because it's a Bethesda game, and Bethesda games tend to be very buggy when they first launch, just because it's so huge, there's just so many different ways that bugs turn up. So I normally, as hard as it is for me, and believe me, it's difficult. When Skyrim came out, I waited about 6 months, which is, it's a very difficult thing for me to do because I'm such a big fan of them. But I waited, and then by then they've solved a lot of the sort of critical bugs. Because the last thing I want is to play for about 8 hours, and then there's a quest that I can't solve, or something like that. So yeah, I'm going to wait for a couple of months. But yeah, if I'm just talking to myself on this show for a couple of episodes, it'll be because Tom's caught up on his PS4.
Yeah. So have you been up to anything, mate, while you've been laying there in your sick bed?
Apart from watching a few things on the iPad and stuff, not really. Watching a few. Catching up on Fear the Walking Dead. Did you watch any of that?
You know what? I haven't seen an episode of it yet. Is it worth it?
It's okay. The first couple of episodes are good, and then they do something where, I don't want to offer spoilers really. They do something where they have this sort of big open world. Obviously, Fear the Walking Dead is set before the events of The Walking Dead, the main show. And whereas the main show is based on the comics, Fear the Walking Dead is based on the theme of the comics, but is otherwise completely new characters and sort of a new setting. And they sort of do something after the first couple of episodes where they get everybody trapped into one very small location. And so what happens is it sort of reduces the expansiveness of what that could have been. And then there's a lot of sort of bad character moments that happen that I didn't quite like. The last episode of it though is quite good, and I think there's a lot of potential there for it. But I suppose the problem I have with it is that I'm a big fan of the Walking Dead, but I have, and I think you would probably agree with me on this as well, we've seen so many zombie movies.
Yeah.
I've grown up loving zombie movies, and I have seen all of this stuff before, So I find it quite difficult to be emotionally impacted by what I've seen on Fear the Walking Dead, zombie invasions and breaking into a building and everybody having to scatter and try to survive. I would imagine because these shows I would imagine appeal to more of a sort of casual viewer, somebody who maybe is not that much of a horror fan, and so these things would be very shocking to people. But to somebody like myself, I'm just like, okay, I mean, I've sort of seen all this stuff before, so it's okay, Yeah, it's okay. The main show is back now, and I watched the first episode of season 6, and that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, Fear the Walking Dead, not essential, but you never know. You never know. It may grow into something interesting. But I mean, how many times can we see, a drama that happens to involve zombies? I suppose that's my thing. It feels a little bit like they're cashing in on it.
Yeah. You're right. It's like, okay, you find somewhere, you hole up there, zombies get in, people argue with each other, people are the real enemy, not the zombie, you know what I mean? It's like, we have seen it all before. And The Walking Dead kind of repeats these things as well, coming to a new community, can you trust them, can you not trust them, etc., etc. And they've done each one just different enough that it keeps me interested, you know what I mean? It's a good show, but a second show... yeah, I'm not too sure, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, since I saw Daredevil, most things sort of pale in comparison to it, really.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with Breaking Bad. Once I saw Breaking Bad, which I'm a huge fan of, there are just certain things that I think stand out because of their originality. I think The Walking Dead, what really makes it stand out for me is that the characters, by this point, most of the characters, I don't always get it right, but most of the characters are quite well fleshed out. I think that's why you're invested, because you want to see what happens to Rick and Carl and Michonne and characters like this. But it's it's not breaking any new ground, really, is it? But they're still entertaining shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I will check that out. But before I check out Fear the Walking Dead, there's a few slasher films that we need to get through, and that's going to be the theme of this week's episode. And it occurred to me while I was watching these and thinking about what we're going to be watching next time. There's certain tiers of slasher film, isn't there? You've got the ones right up there, your Halloweens, your Friday the 13th. You've got your sort of middle ground ones, which we'll probably be looking at next time. Is it Prom Night we're looking at next time?
Yeah, Prom Night and The Prowler.
Prom Night and The Prowler. Ones that maybe just aren't as high profile as Halloween and Friday the 13th, but they're sort of middling. And then you've got these two. So we really are going from top to bottom, because these ones, they're pretty obscure, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, Tom, and rightly so. When you listen to what we've got to say about them, never mind Fear the Walking Dead, you'd be fearful of these two cinematic gems, Tom. But yeah, it's interesting. I guess it's the same of all genres, really. You've got the ones that are, in the upper tiers there, and then you've got the ones that are right down near the bottom, and I would say that these two definitely meet that criteria. And yeah, Prom Night and The Prowler, I would say more on the middle tier of slashers, if you want to say that. I mean, it's like any a genre or subgenre that becomes very popular. They just end up recycling ideas and pumping out as many of them as possible, and that's what happened in the early 80s, really post Halloween and especially post Friday the 13th. They were just hammering these films out in many different countries, and because because it was sort of quite easy to make them, the same as it is with zombie movies. All you have to do is really get a killer. You don't have to show the killer's face a lot of the time. Sometimes you can. Sometimes all you have to do is put on a very crude mask and just, get a bunch of young people out there in some sort of secluded area and pick them off one by one. And so as a result of that, you got a lot of films that were being made. And the truth is that I would say probably 90% of them weren't very good. And here we have two examples of films that are very, very obscure, very difficult to get hold of. Now, what's interesting is, you're going to tell us about Home Sweet Home in a minute. There's a website that I used to visit regularly because it's interesting. There's a viewer who, sorry, not a viewer. We're not on television. There's a listener who named Amanda Reyes, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. Who's we've got some feedback that we're going to read from her on the end of the show, and she posted on Facebook. And I just want to sort of cherry pick one particular thing she said in there, because she said that as far as she can remember, we're not fond of slasher movies, and I was just quite curious as to where she got that from, because I believe, certainly in my case, Tom, and I think for you, I'm a big fan of slasher movies. In fact, we had a whole episode that was dedicated to Friday the 13th. Yeah. There was a period in my life where I pretty much, when I was a teenager, really getting up towards my 20s, where I really did nothing but watch slasher movies. So I'm quite a big fan of them. I recognise that they're definitely oversaturated, but anyway, like I was saying, not to drone on for too long about it, there's a website called Hysteria Lives. Yeah. Which is, really was, and probably still is, the source of information on old slasher movies and reviews of them. And I remember reading a review of Home Sweet Home. I didn't really, I didn't really remember that until I started watching the film. And then I was like, oh, yes, I remember reading about this film. So it is, especially if you go on that website, hysterialives.co.uk, I think it is. You will be amazed, if you're not really a fan of the slasher movie, how many films were actually made, and a lot of them are pretty low grade, aren't they?
I think what's going to be interesting for me looking at these films now is these are forgotten slashers, to be honest, and it's going to be interesting to see whether they deserve that. Do they deserve to just be forgotten in history, or are they undiscovered gems like The Evil, which has come up in the past that we both enjoyed and think should have a higher profile. And the other thing is, you kind of alluded to it there. There was a lot of people at the time thinking, I can do that. I can do a slasher movie. All you need is a few people in one location and a killer, big guy, throw him in there, kill them all. That's all we need to do. Is it that easy to make a slasher movie? And I guess with these two, we're going to find out.
Well, I have to say that if you watch something like Halloween, for example, I mean, I think you do, in order to make a great slasher movie, you do need a little bit of cinematic finesse. John Carpenter had Dean Cundy, who was the cinematographer on that, who is a brilliant cinematographer. And you got so many great shots in that. What you're seeing here, really, especially with these two, are probably amateur filmmakers who are trying to put something together with not very much experience. But you get an amateur filmmaker. It's not a slasher film, but you get an amateur filmmaker like Sam Raimi when he made The Evil Dead, and you've got all these different sort of interesting, because they didn't have very much money, they had to sort of come up with interesting ways to film certain sequences in The Evil Dead. And what you're looking for when you look for a great director, I think a great horror director is somebody who has is able to come up with a little bit of innovation and something with a bit of finesse to it. And so it's going to be interesting to see, Tom, when we review these, if the directors of these ones manage to do any of that. But why don't you tell us what the films actually are?
Okay, we have two, and the first one is called Home Sweet Home, and the other one is called Honeymoon Horror. So Honeymoon Horror, you can see maybe thinking about, we've seen a lot of it before, and we've spoke about it before, people latching onto events or holidays or something. So this one, they're going with honeymoons. Home Sweet Home, oh man, that's got a very sort of tenuous link within the movie. We'll talk about that as we get into it, but yeah, they're the two movies. So shall I crack on and tell us about Home Sweet Home?
Oh, please do, Tom.
I would love to. Okay.
Yay.
Home Sweet Home, also known as Blood Party and Slasher in the House. Slasher in the House. Fucking hell. Okay. It was released in 1981, directed by Nettie Pena, written by Thomas Bush.
So Penis and Bush. Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, that's awful. Okay. There's an escaped mental patient. No, don't get me started. Okay.
Okay.
There's an escaped mental patient on the loose and he's out for blood. Peanut and Boy, what the fuck? Okay. All right.
Do you want me to leave any of this in?
You can leave it in if you want. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. There's an escaped mental patient on the loose and he's out for blood. We first meet the gaining madman, he certainly is, played by Jake Steinfeld, who's built like a bodybuilder, when he assaults and chokes an unassuming man and steals his car. On the radio, we hear details about the man's escape, having been incarcerated many years ago for killing his parents. He injects PCP into his tongue, revving up his homicidal tendencies even further, and then drives off in search of more victims. Of course, he spots an old woman crossing the road with her shopping and swiftly runs her over. Jesus. Gleefully driving off with her blood splattered all over the windscreen. There's a gathering going on at the Bradleys. It's Thanksgiving, and their rural house is attended by members of their family and friends. Scott brings his new girlfriend out to the house, though seemingly can't resist his carnal desires. We meet a number of characters here, including guitar-obsessed Paul Stanley wannabe Mistake, oh god, his father Bradley and girlfriend Lisa, and beer-obsessed Wayne and his potential Latin girlfriend Maria. Bradley's young daughter Angel is also at the house, ready for tonight's meal. Unbeknownst to the house dwellers, however, is the presence of our mental patient who happens upon the house and the local area. He cuts the power and phone line, leaving everyone vulnerable. Nevertheless, various members of the group head out on various trips, be it to the store to get booze or to the gas station. The first member of the group to bite the dust is Emil Bradley, who is hoping to steal a battery from an abandoned car. With much of his body inside the front of the car looting the battery, the killer jumps on the hood, crushing Bradley to death. It's the first of many deaths, as the killer soon stalks and kills members of the group one by one. Whether he's stabbing Gail in the face with a broken bottle or electrocuting Mistake with his electric guitar, the killer shows no mercy and rarely speaks. He simply laughs. And so it falls to Jennifer and Scott, who are protecting Angel, to fend off the mad killer as he seeks to enter the home and claim his final victims.
Oh, you were gone forever.
It's all right now. All right, sweetheart. We're perfectly safe. If Mistake killed Maria, I'm sure he's still running. In the morning, we'll talk to the police and the whole thing will be over.
I know, but what if he didn't kill her? What if there's somebody else running around out there?
Well, who else could even find this place? Remember, the power's been off 7 hours.
I know, but the Mistake just didn't seem as though he could hurt a fly.
Well, he was trying to make it with an older woman. Maybe he got frustrated.
Maybe it was an accident, too.
I don't know. I just wish someone would get back here with my car. I want to get away from this place.
Oh, me too. Oh, me too.
I have to go to the bathroom.
I'm not leaving this fire. Honey, you just went to the bathroom.
I have to go to the bathroom.
It's okay, sweetheart. I'll take you. But it's dark down there. You sure you won't be scared? So much for trying to talk her out of it.
Take her, but don't spend the night there.
So, Chris, I can't wait to hear what you think of Home Sweet Home. Go.
Well, what can I say about this? First of all, I wonder how I do it. I wonder how I managed to write such a serious sounding synopsis for these movies, some of these daft ones.
It's a good job you do it, because I couldn't do it. I couldn't get that much plot out of it, to be honest. But go on.
No, well, that you see, that a lot of people probably don't know. That's what I've struggled with sometimes on some of these movies that we've covered in the past. And this one is, how do you manage to scrape that much plot out of it? You know, I probably wrote more of a script than they did. Yeah, Home Sweet Home. I mean, it's what an interesting experience it was to watch this one. First of all, we got a killer who, like most people have been saying, you're going to hear it in the feedback, looks a bit like Lou Ferrigno, laughs like SpongeBob SquarePants. It's a remarkable daft presence in the movie. I mean, look, to give you a general overview before we get into all the details of it, I'm laughing along. I didn't like the movie very much. I found it to be quite boring, actually. But you have to say, I mean, it's an experience. It's a funny thing, when I go into the trivia of this, you're going to be quite surprised that a lot of the people who are in this, who are awful. I mean, the acting in this is really, really bad. Some of the worst we've seen so far, I think, since we've been covering this show. And we've seen some bad movies, but the acting in this is really quite appalling. And quite a lot of these people ended up going on to do more work, you know, including the guy who plays the killer. So it's quite remarkable. It is, you know, I'll give them credit for the fact that it, unlike Honeymoon Horror, which of course we're going to get to a bit later, which is more, I would say, is more of a conventional slasher. This one, there's no pretense here. They don't pretend that, as if they want to hide the identity of the killer at all, because they don't. We see the killer's face from moment one. He's just a muscly dude with no charisma who runs around gurning and laughing maniacally, and that's about it, really. Couple of creative deaths in there. Quite difficult to see, though. The copy of it we watched was quite dark during a lot of scenes, so there were a couple of kill scenes that I couldn't quite make out. One in particular with a broken bottle. Anyway, I'm going on and on and on and on and on. I need to give you your chance to pipe in, Tom. But yeah, as a general overview, I didn't like the movie very much, but it's hard to ignore the extreme cheese factor of this one. And I have to say that, you know, while I didn't like the movie and I was bored by it, I you know, it is a bit of a cheesy gem in its own way.
I think it's I would describe this movie as totally misjudged in, you know, many ways. They just misjudge most things. You got this escaped mental patient who has been, you know, pumping the iron for a few years, and you know, it is nice that America they look after the mentally ill by providing them with well-equipped gyms and a nutrition program, you know, because this is a guy who's, you know, pretty much a world-class bodybuilder. And and he comes out, but okay, fair enough, you got a big guy. And this is the thing, I think they must have just thought, let's get a big guy, big scary guy. Well, they got a big guy. And he does this maniacal laugh all the way through it, but he just can't pull it off. So you've got him, you've got a group of people who I can barely tell apart, and obviously they look differently, but I don't know who any of them are. They might mention it, but I'm so disinterested in them that it just washes over me who they are related to each other, why they're where they are, this, that, and the other. I kind of get that they're going there for Thanksgiving, but it's like, okay, we got this guy, he's always complaining that he's hungry. We've got this woman who can't speak English and just plays the guitar. We've got Mistake, who's just one of the most annoying characters I've ever seen in a slasher movie.
Yeah.
And they just seem to get everything wrong in this movie pretty much, and I don't like it one bit. It is an experience. I think if you get a chance to watch it, you should watch it just to sit there and go, what the fuck were they thinking, you know? And that's the best I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where I'm coming from as well. You know, I don't like the movie. Like I say, I was bored by it. You know, it's one of those movies where I'm looking at the time and going, oh, it's just going to finish. You know, it's only about, you know, an hour and 20 minutes or something. It's not very long. But it is one of those things where I'm looking at the progress line on my iPad, which is where I watched it, and I'm like, oh, God, I hope it ends soon. But the reason I call it a cheesy gem is just because it's so daft and it's so sort of campy, or certainly the killer is, that I can totally understand why somebody would look at this and think, "Oh, this is cheese-tastic," but it fails in so many areas. I mean, first of all, you mentioned it there, but we've got to talk about Mistake, and to a slightly lesser degree, the Maria, who's the Latin girl. Two of the most annoying characters that I've seen on a television screen for quite some time. I say television screen, I watched it on my iPad. I wanted to throw my iPad out the window, and it's quite an expensive piece of kit, but it really was like... Mistake in particular. So he's this guy who runs around. He's got face paint on. He looks a bit like a mime artist or like a Kiss wannabe. Yeah. He's got an amp on his back, and he just runs around playing his guitar, or pretending to play his guitar, as it were. And it's just so irritating. And he's one of the last people to die in the movie as well. So you're stuck with him for quite a long time. Just really irritating and annoying. You've got, like I was saying when I wrote the synopsis, Bradley, who's the sort of main guy there, who's the father of Mistake, who's the one who ends up being killed by the car bonnet later on. He is, I thought, was, generally the most amiable person there. None of these actors, though, they may have become good later on, some of them. But in this movie... I mean, whether it's the direction, whether it's the script, look, I'm not looking for a cinematic masterpiece by any means or any sort of Oscar caliber acting, but I mean, this is pretty bottom of the barrel, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just going back to Mistake, you're right, he's got this amp on his back. He runs around playing the guitar, just generally annoying people. I think he's supposed to be comic relief, but he's too annoying to be funny. Interestingly, looking at the characters or the credits, his only other credit was being in Wonder Woman, where he played a mime. So I think that was probably his stock in trade, being a mime, because he does that trick with the ball later on, doesn't he? The balls for the kid. Yeah. He doesn't show his balls to a kid. He basically does a magic trick with some balls.
Did you watch a different movie than I did, Tom?
That was a mistake. But he sort of sits there and he does this trick. So I think he's probably a mime, and they've wanted to have this character in this movie. For some reason, I don't know why anyone would sit there and think this was a good idea, but that's what they've gone with. So they probably got a mime to do it. So that's probably what he is. But he is just so annoying. He runs around cackling like the Joker. Playing his guitar, declaring his love for one of the women. Awful, absolutely awful. But, like you say, it's a slasher. We don't expect Oscar caliber acting. But, as we've said a million times, it's when the overall is so bad that we start to focus on these things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like you were saying there, the Mistake was probably intended to be comic relief. Well, the only comic relief that we really get is the killer himself, because he's just so daft, and just so sort of over the top and campy and really, really bad. That's what adds the comic relief to it. But yeah, you're right. There's just so many aspects of this that are just very, very, very poorly done. Especially, I found that the final girl in this, who's named Jennifer, I thought that until really the very end of the movie, her reactions to the things that are happening, there's no emotion at all. And most of the people she's met that evening, because she's been brought there, she's the new girlfriend of one of the guys. I can't remember what the names of everybody is, Tom, because they're just so sort of paper thin, aren't they? Really, but she just has no emotion through the whole thing and no reaction to anything until the very end, where suddenly she starts sort of screaming like a banshee. It's very, very poor characters. And I'm the sort of person who, I love a slasher where you do have a couple of strong characters. I always go back to somebody like Shelley, who's the the sort of overweight prankster guy in Friday the 13th Part 3, who is a bit irritating, in the way that Mistake might be. But, as you find out just before he dies, he's the one who ends up giving Jason the iconic hockey mask, actually, because he has it. It's sort of has a heart of gold, really, but does pranks in order to cover up his own insecurity. Whereas with a character like Mistake, it's just irritating for the sake of it, really.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate though in that and of course we're going to end up spoiling everything about this movie, folks. So do bear that in mind. mistake later on in the movie, he does end up being killed. A bit too late for my liking, but does end up getting electrocuted by his own electric guitar. Not by accident. The killer finds him.
Yeah.
So at least he's out of the way. But yeah, it's difficult to know really, Tom, what to say, because this is the low point of slasher filmmaking, if you like. Post Friday the 13th, I believe. I think this came out in, 1981, but the same year as Friday the 13th Part 2, wasn't it?
I think so. So. There's a few things that stick out to me as being problematic, apart from the obvious. The thing is, let's take Friday the 13th, let's take Elm Street, let's take Halloween, and I know they're the top of the kind of tree when it comes to slashers, but with Friday the 13th, you know where you are. You're in a summer camp, and it's very defined. On Elm Street, you're in Elm Street. In Halloween, you're in that street in Haddonfield. The locations are very well defined. Where you are, where your kids are sort of cornered, if you like. In this, the how I just never really got a sense of where they were. It was just such a bland location. And you were mentioning before the final girl. She's no final girl. She's a final girl by default, by the fact that she just didn't die she just didn't die. At the very, very least, these were terribly drawn characters, but at the very least, the final girl should have something to hook you to her, to make you like her, to make you not want to die. I couldn't give a shit if this girl died or not.
Yeah. No character building at all, none at all. And that makes it very difficult to really... I mean, I didn't really feel sorry for anybody in this at all, I didn't think, oh, it's a shame that person died. I was quite happy to get rid of all of them. And the only reason at the end of the day the girl even survives the night is because she passes out and the killer can't find her. So he's just like, oh, well, I'll just stand outside next to a tree for the night and wait for her to come out. So it's... yeah, it's not good. Now we got to talk about the little girl in this.
Yeah.
Whose name is Angel. Although it's funny enough, I'm going to tell you a bit of trivia about this little girl a bit later on, but it doesn't really add anything to the story at all. Several times in the movie, the characters just leave her to her own devices, including allowing her to pick up a massive carving knife to start chopping away at a turkey. One interesting thing about this movie, so just as an aside, is that it is one of the few horror movies that's set on Thanksgiving.
Right.
There's a little bit of a link to some sort of holiday there. And they do have a Thanksgiving dinner later on, so I suppose you could say it fits into that. But anyway, we've got this little girl. There's a moment in this movie that really made me laugh, where you've got... So almost everybody's been taken out by the killer. We'll cover some of those deaths and the car bonnet one and everything. We'll go back, but I've got to talk about this while it's on my mind. So you've got Jennifer and Scott, that's her boyfriend. Jennifer is the final girl in the movie, so just as Tom said, only the final girl by default, because there's nobody better than her. She is, cuddling up with Angel, this little girl, and the guy's saying to her, oh, you would make such a good mother. And she's like, oh, yeah, I find it easy. It's a very natural thing to care for a child. About 5 minutes later, this guy Scott's wandering around trying to make sure all the doors are locked and everything. The killer gets in somehow and ends up taking Scott down. And despite her apparently motherly instincts, she and Scott, they race out of that house and they leave that little girl in the house with the killer and bugger off.
Yeah.
and Scott is, to his credit, is like, no, we should go back in and get her. Why you wouldn't have thought of that first, I don't know, considering your quote-unquote motherly instincts. But he ends up getting caught by the killer and killed. So now you've got Jennifer left, and Jennifer just buggers off and leaves that little girl to her own device. Doesn't give a shit at all. Yeah, motherly instincts, my arse. And at the end of the movie, we find out the little girl wandered out onto the highway and was found by the police. And then, in the back of the police car at the end, she's cuddling her. I'm so glad you're safe. You didn't give a shit. You ran for your life the first moment you could. So I had to bring that up because that is an hilariously bad character moment.
let's talk about our killer. We've sort of touched on it. This big brute, this muscly guy. The only way you get a physique like that is through hard training, good nutrition. He's been in a mental institution for years, so that must be how he spent his days. It's got to be one of the worst killers I've ever seen in a slasher movie. He is just so wrong for this. I remember Jake Steinfeld from back in the 80s, I think. I think he was probably bigger in America than he was here as this fitness trainer to the stars. And he's just this big lug of a guy, this big door, oh, come and train with me, I'll train. He's just totally got no menace in him. He's just this big dopey guy who says, I'll train you. And
yeah, he's quite an intelligent bloke. I mean, he's got this whole sort of fitness empire.
yeah.
I think you have to be a good businessman for that. But yeah,
But outwardly, if you sort of, I apologise. I'm sure he is a lovely bloke, but outwardly, I think you just kind of see him as this big lug, don't you? And
yeah,
the thing is, he does this maniacal laugh, which is just awful. But the one bit that made me perk up and laugh in this film was when the dad, I think his name was Bradley, was it?
Yeah.
He's poking around under a car bonnet and the killer is lurking in the bushes and he's got a knife. So you think, oh, he's going to go over and, slip the knife between his ribs or cut his throat or whatever. And he just sprints over, jumps like about 10 foot in, not 10 foot, but he jumps into the air, brings himself down on top of the car bonnet, squashes the guy, and then just fucks off and runs away. And I just think it was one of the few times in the film that I kind of laughed, and I thought, you know what, if this is, and later on he throws a girl over the car bonnet who smacks her head on a rock and dies. And I thought, you know what, if that's going to be this killer's thing, that he just does these crazy, throws someone over a tree or, I thought maybe that would be quite fun. But unfortunately, they're the only two kills that really, gave him any sort of personality, because he's just all over the place, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, when he gets into the higher, the upper registers of that laugh, he sounds like SpongeBob SquarePants. I'm telling you. And I think SpongeBob SquarePants is quite demented as well, so I suppose it fits. But there are a couple of, like you say, sort of creative deaths in this. You don't get to see very much. But, I know there was a stabbing in the face with a broken bottle. I couldn't really make it out that well just because of the version we had. It was quite dark. But I would say the most creative moment is definitely the car bonnet thing. Now, there's a film that I'm actually quite fond of, and I would say it's a slasher that's in the sort of middle tier that doesn't get talked about. That gets talked about more than this, definitely. It's not as obscure. But it's a film called Madman. Oh, yeah. And, and it's a slasher film that I'm very fond of, actually, because it's got an infamous scene where a woman is looking into a car bonnet and the killer jumps on top of the car bonnet while she's looking inside it and decapitates her. And it's a really, really good slasher kill, probably one of the best ones that doesn't get looked at very often. And it just reminded me of that for some reason. But Madman did it a lot better. I think Madman was released the same year, possibly, as this. Maybe it was 1980. Certainly made around the same time the original Friday the 13th was. But it just reminded me of that. But if you want to see sort of a slasher film that's, better than this, a little bit more polished, but still sort of cheesy and daft, Madman is a good recommendation. A very sort of similar kill to this one. But like you say, going back to the killer, apart from that, Jake Steinfeld does not make a very convincing killer. No, I would say. Gurning, laughing. He only really speaks, I think there's once or twice maybe in the whole movie. He has a line of dialogue, not very convincing. The guy has made his career really out of being a motivational speaker. So it's ironic, really, that he barely speaks in this, and when he does, it doesn't sound very convincing, really. Not a great film killer. What I've noticed, Tom, is that we're having more fun talking about this one than we had watching it.
That's a good point. It is a good point. And you know what? If Freddy and Jason are top of the tree in terms of slashers, I guess this guy, and the guy had a final exam at the bottom. They should have a little team up movie and just bore us all to death, because this was boring.
Yeah, this reminded me of Final Exam just in terms of how boring it was, actually. And funnily enough, you can make another link there, which is that Final Exam also had no particular regard for trying to keep the killer's identity secret at all. It was just a dude, just a guy who wanted to kill people, and never really established it beyond that. And this is the same thing here. He's just an escaped mental patient. We see him all the time. We see him lurking around. He's just a big dude, and he's just going to kill people because it's just something to do, isn't it? I'm mental and I want to kill people.
Yeah, they do mention, he does say something briefly about his mum being a whore or something. He insults his mother in some way, and it's like, okay, is that some sort of thing alluding to that you're damaged because of your mother? But it's like a 1 second line. It's not really elaborated on.
Yeah, we're meant to sort of infer from that he's got something against women, because he does say something like all women are useless or something like that. So we get it from that. But you're not looking for development on the killer here, folks, because you're not going to get any of it. I sort of found that the last 20 minutes or so of it, little bit, and I mean a teensy little bit of tension there.
Yeah.
With when the killer's sort of trying to get into the house and you don't really know where he is, and when he jumps out and scares Scott half to death, I thought that was semi-effective. I just couldn't stop laughing really when they left that little girl to die. That just is. Once I saw that, and especially at the end when, like I was saying earlier on, when we discovered that the only reason that Jennifer even survives the night is because she hides herself away and then passes out, and then the killer just gives up looking for her because he can't find her, and that's the only reason why she survives. And then at the end of the movie, of course, we get the she emerges from the house hoping that he's gone, and he jumps out and scares her, and he wants to kill her, and the cops come along. And, they see this big guy with blood gushing out of his mouth, because I guess we didn't say, but she had stabbed him in the back the night before with a big kitchen knife. And, somehow, because he's so roided up, I guess, I would imagine it'd be quite difficult to take a guy like that down anyway. I remember seeing a video quite some years ago where there was this big bodybuilder guy who went on some sort of rampage in America, and the cops tried to take him down with a taser. And because of his body mass, it was incredibly difficult to take the guy down. I would imagine it would be quite... I don't know if stabbing somebody in the back with a knife would be livable for as long as it was for him, but... Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, and they do say he's, big on his PCP as well, the angel dust kind of thing. But again, I don't know whether that... I guess in the moment, it makes them not feel pain. But he's had that stab wound for a few hours now, hasn't he? But anyway, let's not get caught up on such details.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, you're absolutely right. But so in the end, the cops, they shoot him with a shotgun and everything, and he collapses to the floor. He's clearly dead. And like we say, Jennifer is the only survivor of the film, apart from Angel, the little girl who wandered out onto the highway after being taken care of so well by the woman with the motherly instinct. And of course, as is the case, it's become a bit of a cliche now at the end of horror movies that, well, you think the killer is dead, but he or she is not actually dead for some reason. I mean, at least there was more of a supernatural reason for why Jason and Michael Myers. I mean, okay, it wasn't established until probably later on in both of those series, but there was more of a reason as to why they would get back up again at the end of it. But in this one, he's laying there and all of a sudden he opens his eyes and looks at the camera like, oh, I'm still here, ready to destroy you with my shitty acting.
Yes.
And that's the end of it, really.
Yeah, it's got to be one of... I mean, we expect this from slashers, don't we? But it's got to be one of the worst I've ever seen in terms of that final moment. It was laughable, and it's like... I pray to God you never make a sequel. Luckily, obviously, we're 30 years on now. They're not going to do that. But they always thought sequel, or they always thought final sort of shock. It wasn't shock. It was laughable. But what a bad movie. terrible movie.
Yeah, it was, but I had fun talking about it, which is what I wanted.
Yeah.
Really was a movie that was so sort of laughably bad that we could talk about it. Now I have to say that we covered Invasion of the Blood Farmers on the last show. To me, this is just as bad as Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Although, if you can believe it, that film is made in an even more amateur way. But there is something that's very entertaining about Invasion of the Blood Farmers. I was never bored by it. And the concept of it was so strange, these sort of, druid alien vampire guys. That there was something about that concept that was so sort of original and off the wall. And it was so badly done in an entertaining fashion. This, on the other hand, it's got cheesy, sort of good cheesy moments in it. But generally, like I think we both said, it's just very boring. I couldn't imagine sitting and watching this again.
No, I don't. It's bad, but I don't think it gets itself to that level, does it? Where you can say, yeah, it's awful, but I'm just having such a good time laughing at it. There's a couple of moments, but yeah, definitely it doesn't reach that level at all.
Yeah, entertaining moments, but like you say, it doesn't really carry it through the whole thing. And a killer that is just, I would say, the killer in The New York Ripper, which is, a movie that is otherwise, fairly bleak and gory and everything, but the killer in The New York Ripper speaks like Donald Duck.
Yeah.
But even that it pales in comparison to this guy, the gurning bodybuilder played by Jake Steinfeld. Yeah, not a fan of this one, but like I said when I started, that it is a cheesy gem simply because, see, when I say gem, that implies that it's something that you need to see, and I'm not saying that at all, but there is something about it. You could watch like a review of this on YouTube or something, or like some clips of it on YouTube, and I think you would enjoy the cheesiness of seeing that killer running around. But otherwise, you're best to avoid it, because Tom and I, we certainly didn't have a very good time with it.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the chat that we've just had about it was more fun than watching it. It was boring and misjudged and not very good at all. But I've had a fun time talking about it, so there is that.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Well, Tom, let me give you some trivia, because I'm sure you're dying to know
I can't wait.
Some more information about this. Well, look, you mentioned it before, but Jake Steinfeld, who plays the maniacal laughing killer, unbelievably has gone on to have a very strong career as a bodybuilding and fitness expert, making regular appearances on TV to promote healthy eating and exercise. When I was doing research for this, I actually looked up some clips of him on YouTube, and he's quite an intelligent guy. He's obviously built up his own empire. He also continued to star in TV shows and movies, and has even done some voice acting parts. This is unbelievable to me. Has done some voice acting parts in films like Pixar's Ratatouille and Studio Ghibli's From Up on Poppy Hill. Studio Ghibli, which is, to me, is the sort of gold standard of an animated movie. He starred in his own family comedy series entitled Big Brother Jake from 1990 to 1994, appearing in all 81 episodes of the show. This man had his own sitcom, Tom.
Wow.
And I think I saw an episode of this many years ago, and I don't know whether it was in the UK, whether I saw it in America, but I think I've seen an episode of this. He also has a noteworthy relative. Now, this is interesting. He's the uncle of Oscar-nominated actress Haley Steinfeld, who first came to prominence as Mattie Ross in the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit. I don't know if you ever saw that, Tom.
I haven't. I'd quite like to see it, but I didn't see it, no.
No, she's really, really brilliant. One of those roles where I would imagine it would have been like when you first saw Jodie Foster. And sort of has this otherworldliness and this sort of almost kind of wisdom to her, despite being at such a young age. She definitely had that, and has gone on to star in films like Pitch Perfect 2 and such, so is climbing up the ranks, as it were. Now, let me tell you about Vanessa Shaw, who plays the shy little girl Angel here. She would also go on to have a strong acting career as she got older, with another number of film credits that include appearances in the remake of 3:10 to Yuma and Side Effects. She also had a main role as a member of the Carter family in 2006's The Hills Have Eyes remake. So she probably had a look back on this someday when she became a teenager and thought, nope, I've got to do better than this in life. They left me for dead. So she wandered out onto the highway and got herself a better agent, and became something of a notable actor. Let me tell you about Don Edmonds, who played Bradley here, the one who died Crushed by the Car Bonnet. He would go on to act in more films and TV shows through the 80s and 90s, and also had a strong career in exploitation films. He directed the two infamous cult classics, Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, and its sequel, Ilsa, Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheiks, released in 75 and 76 respectively. He worked as a producer on many projects, including True Romance, and helped Quentin Tarantino as a young upstart he was, in beginning his career as a filmmaker. He sadly passed away in 2009 at the age of 71. Can you believe it, Tom? Some of the people who were absolutely rubbish in this film actually ended up, having quite fruitful careers, really.
I think they must have all got together afterwards and said, let us never speak of this again, and just went on with their lives.
Absolutely. Well, actor Charles Hoyce, who plays Wayne, the beer-obsessed man who wants to get into the panties of the resident Spanish girl, also went on to a fruitful acting career and is known for appearances in films like Field of Dreams and most recently Southpaw, which is Kurt Sutter's new film that stars Jake Gyllenhaal. I think Kurt Sutter is the man behind the show Sons of Anarchy. That's the one. Yeah. Director Natty Penis was largely inactive as a director after Home Sweet Home. You can understand why. He didn't direct another project until 2009 when he helmed a documentary about the environment and wind turbines. It sounds very interesting, entitled They're Not Green. And finally, writer Thomas Bush, Penis and Bush, did not go on to write any other screenplays. You can understand why, but he did act as an assistant sound editor on Sam Raimi's classic Evil Dead 2 from 1987. So quite a lot of these people, I didn't cover everybody here, but quite a lot of these people seem to have gone on to had more success, apart from the director, who only has done one thing since this film was released and several decades after. Most of the people seem to sort of gone on to do better things.
The mind boggles. I guess a lot of people have these projects in their closet, don't they? Even George Clooney's got Attack of the Killer Tomato, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very interesting. But anyway, shall we move on from this classic project from Peanut and Bush and have a look at Honeymoon Horror?
Well, we should, Tom, but before we do that, you've jumped the gun there because we need to tell people that it's very important information, Tom. We need to tell people, where can they get this movie?
YouTube.
Go on YouTube. Right, so now let me tell you about a film called Honeymoon Horror, also known as Honeymoon, Tom. Released in 1982, directed by Harry Preston and written by L.L. Carney and Harry Preston. I'm going to read the synopsis to you right now. So, Frank lives on an island with his wife Elaine. They own cabins on the island, with the location primarily used by new couples honeymooning. Frank kisses Elaine goodbye one night and prepares to set off to the mainland in a boat. Seizing her opportunity and thinking Frank has already left, she runs over to another cabin where Frank's friend Vic lives and proceeds to kiss him. They've clearly been having an affair for quite some time. Needing cigarettes, Frank returns to the house to find Elaine missing and quickly realises that she's in the house with Vic. He bursts in and the two fight until Elaine kills him with a heavy object. His fall starts a fire and Elaine elects to let him burn with the cabin, escaping with her lover. Several years pass by and the cabins have reopened. Elaine has now married Vic and the two currently run the island retreat, though hope to build it up enough to put it on the market so that they can finally leave. There's fighting and trouble in the marriage, but Elaine is determined to stay until the retreat is good enough to sell. A number of newlywed couples are planning on visiting and staying overnight on the island, and the first guests to turn up are a couple of young girls who have arrived early to decorate some of the cabins in honour of them. However, things almost immediately go awry when one of the girls finds the body of the maid dead in a wardrobe. The girls are soon dispatched in grisly ways by an unseen killer. The couples turn up in a boat and things seem relatively normal, with nobody being aware of the missing girls, but the night gets bloodier and bloodier as the mysterious killer spies on and hunts members of the group, forcing Elaine and Vic to act as bodies begin turning up. Suspicion immediately falls on Joe, the mute handyman who has worked on the island for a number of years, and Vic and one of the young men ties him up and locks him away. However, is Joe really the one doing it, or could there be someone else running around the island? Perhaps even Elaine's old husband Frank, seeking revenge? Well, she and Vic are about to find out in a bloody battle to the death.
Vic, I want to leave.
Leave the island? Tonight.
I wish we could. No, tomorrow. As soon as those kids get out of here. You were right about this place.
Now you're talking, baby.
We don't have to live here. We can hire a couple to run the place till I get a buyer. He was a son of a bitch. He deserved to die. You don't know the half of it from the things he did to me. He would have killed you, Vic. He would have killed both of us.
So, Tom, when you and I go on our honeymoon together, I hope nothing like this happens. But why don't you tell me what you thought of Honeymoon Horror? Just a subtle hint there, Tom, if you want to propose to me any day. I'm fine. I'm good for it.
Okay. Honeymoon Horror.
Hurtful.
You know, I gotta give it some credit for having the fastest creation of a slasher ever. Really, you know, Elaine has an affair with Vic. Frank comes back, finds Vic with Elaine. Frank gets killed, becomes a slasher. You know, it's all there in the first 2 minutes of the movie. So, fair enough. At least this killer has got a backstory, which is something the Final Exam and, you know, our friend in Home Sweet Home barely had one. So, you know, fair play to that. I kind of had a bit of goodwill towards this in the beginning. It's obviously very cheap, very low rent, but it starts off okay. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be cheap and shitty, but it might be kind of fun. But then it gets boring as hell for a long time. And then it ends. And that's it, really. That's all I can really say. I liked it better than Home Sweet Home, but it's boring. And fun at times, but only very briefly. I can't really give it any better than that. What about you?
I sort of disagree with you slightly. I think this is better than Home Sweet Home. They're both pretty rubbish, really, and they're both absolutely, you know, low grade, bottom of the barrel. But I was really bored by this. I think one of the big problems with this is that the killer takes so long to strike a lot of the time, especially in the second half of the movie. I mean, he's running around all over the place. You gave it away there anyway. I mean, it's really no particular surprise that, you know, Frank is the killer, who didn't really die, was obviously burned, you know, to almost be unrecognisable, but survived the night. They give it away fairly early on when you can see that his hand is quite clearly burnt, so it must be Frank.
Yeah.
I just think that there's some good stuff in here. You know, I think if there was a bit more polish. I mean, you know, very low production values. Which is one of the big problems with it. You know, you can tell. The funny thing is that a lot of the people who worked on this movie ended up doing nothing else. And I think the acting in this movie, there's some really ropey stuff in there, don't get me wrong, especially the sheriff. We've got to talk about him. But a couple of the actors I thought were better generally than the ones in Home Sweet Home.
Yeah.
And yet they were those are the ones who ended up going on to do better work than this. Most of these guys did nothing else. But it is. I agree with you in that. You know, certainly I think the first half of the movie is stronger. I sort of liked it when we didn't really know who... there was more of a... They were trying to sort of keep the identity of the killer a bit secret during the first sort of quarter of it or so, and I like that more than later on when we knew, okay, well, I can see that his hand is burnt, so obviously we know it's Frank. You've already given it away, you know. If they hadn't done that, I think it could have been more of a mystery towards the end, because I was initially thinking... Because I'm always suspicious when I watch a movie where... the killer is supposed to be mysterious. You're not supposed to know their identity until right near the end of it. I'm always suspicious of everybody, and I'm like, and so when I saw the bumbling comedy cops at the beginning, and I was looking at not the sheriff, the big guy, but the other guy, I was like, at one point they sort of framed him in a way where I was like, oh, I bet that's the guy. I bet he's going to be the killer, and we think it's Frank, but it's actually him. And then of course, not too long after the movie starts, we see, okay, well the guy's hand is burnt, and the cops are on the main island, so it can't possibly have been him, so it must be Frank. That's the kind of thing I do, Tom, when I watch these movies. I'm a bit like Sherlock Holmes. I sit there and try to work out who the killer is. And but I think there are sort of good... I like the concept of it, I think. At least it's way more of a conventional slasher than Home Sweet Home is.
I think it is definitely better formed. We've got a better sense of location where we are, this sort of honeymoon retreat. even though the honeymoon couples are quite bland and interchangeable, they're the honeymoon couples. Earlier on, we've got the sorority girls. We've got our two main characters, Vic and Elaine. So we know who our people are. Whereas in Home Sweet Home, it was like, who are these people? And I think where it fell down for me was that I wish they'd have just went with it. That Frank is the killer, because we have a couple of kills early on. One of them's they go for being quite brutal and bloody, but it's slightly comical, but in a fun way. I don't mind that at all. I just wish they'd have kind of went with showing Frank a bit more, because it couldn't do suspense well. So just get him out there, get him killing people. You know what I mean? There was just a stretch there where it just took too long to really get Frank out here and killing people, because they'd done a makeup job on him, okay, and it wasn't the best, but it was fine and it was fun. So just use it, and I think that's where it fell down for me.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you. I think one of the things I do like is that there's sort of an interesting dynamic here, which we don't often get in a slasher movie, really. Is we always, we tend to get, if you look at Friday the 13th, we have a character like Alice, who is the sort of the typical final girl kind of character. We don't really have that here. What we have is Elaine and Vic, who are our main characters, who are not very likable people. No. Because at the end of the day, Elaine was cheating on Frank right at the beginning, and she allowed him to die in the cabin. They were sort of quite selfish about it. You could tell that Vic was, had a bit more regret about it than she did. But so they're not very nice people, really, and they did it so that they could be together. I found that interesting, that concept of, because then you're like, well, do I sort of care about these people, whether they live or die? And I'm not really sure if I did. I mean, Vic's quite a sleazy guy, isn't he? I mean, he's lecherous, and he reminds me of a young Burt Reynolds, actually. He had a bit of that sort of quality to him, that grin, when young girls come in and he's sort of, all leery about them. But it, like you say, it really falls on you've got to make use of what you have, and obviously they didn't have very much money when they were making this. So I think, like you say, maybe since you're not really trying to hide the identity of the killer, certainly not after the first 20, 25 minutes or so, you may as well get him out there. Let's have a look at him and let's see him, taking people down. The death scenes in this, like you say, they're trying for brutal. The problem is they're shot very, very quickly. Yeah. It seems quite obvious to me that we're either watching a cut version, or my feeling is that they very purposely cut them down in order to, to make sure that they weren't, because at this time I would imagine the MPAA was beginning to come in and really, clamp down on gore in horror movies, sadly. And I would imagine that they cut them very quickly like that, because there's one sort of kill early on that I thought could have been more effective if we'd seen more of it, and that was when, the girl who's laying out on the boat at night. Yeah. And the killer comes in. I think he's got an axe and he chops her arm off. That's right. And and you see the arm sort of fall off to the side. And it's like, okay, that could have been quite cool if we'd seen just a little bit more of that. All the deaths in this, though, are like I say, cut very, very quickly. What's funny, though, is that, and this is quite different for a slasher movie, is that most of the main kids survive. A couple of them die, but most of them manage to get away, really. It's a lot of this is sort of centered on Elaine and Vic, and you have to really, how invested you're going to be, I think, when you take everything else out of it, is whether you happen to, whether you can get behind those characters, even if you don't like them much, whether you can sort of dig with that. And I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic, the two of them there. Like you say, though, in the second half of the movie, the killer, there's a lot of him just running around looking at things. And it just is like, do something, man. Yeah. It takes too long to strike. And so when something happens, I was like, yes, something's actually happening now. It's not just all of them running around. And but I have to say that you said right at the very beginning, you've got some goodwill towards that. That's the way I felt as well. I could tell that more so they were trying here to put something good together. There are some big flaws to it. I mean, do we want to talk about more of the main plot, or do we want to talk about the bumbling comedy cops here?
Let's take a step back for a minute, because early on we have, I guess, the first kill, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there's a maid on the island, isn't there? A maid with a terrible British accent. You know, you'll probably do it better than me, but it's
Cool, blimey, governor. That's giving me the willies, old chum.
That's right. This place gives me the willies. And then she's dead in a cupboard, and there's no lead up to it at all. You know what I mean? It's like we don't even know that there's a killer out there yet, and all of a sudden someone opens the door and she's dead in the cupboard. But
I thought it was a prank. You know, like you get pranked. People always play pranks in these early 80s slasher movies. I thought it was a prank at first because that's the sort of thing you would see. You know, one of the girls or something would have left like a fake body or something in there, or would have put makeup on her face, and then she'd be like, ha ha ha, surprise. But it wasn't. The killer legitimately took the maid out.
Well, that's it, because it was so early on, and there'd been absolutely no build up. Well, you know, maybe there'd been a little. I can't remember. But there'd been nothing to really say, oh, there's a killer out there. It's just like, okay, I'll open this. Oh, someone's dead in there. And the maid was dead. And then we had, you know, the sort of sorority girl laying next to the boat, which is maybe the best kill of the movie, where he chops her arm off and stuff. And again, goodwill, not the best effects in the world, but okay, we're in that 80s bloody rubber slasher mode. And I was happy with that, you know. And then you mentioned in your synopsis that it was several years later. I think it was actually, I'm happy to stand corrected, because when she's showing the people around the island, these honeymoon couples who've arrived to have their nice little honeymoon on the island, she tells them the story of how her husband burned to death on the island a year earlier. So
oh, right, okay. So I read on IMDb that it was 5 years later, but but then,
I'm happy to stand corrected, but I think she said a year ago, which is just what you want to tell your guests when they come on holiday, that your husband died in a fire a year earlier.
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree with you, because I don't want to argue over this movie. You know, this is a honeymoon horror, you know, so I'm going to agree with you. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Well, that's it initially, you know. I mean, plot-wise, there's the setup. There's a long stretch where I think nothing much happens. I think he tries to create a bit of suspense, but it's not the best, and then Frank comes out. So we'll get to the end section later, but I think you wanted to say something about the comedy cops, didn't you?
Well, yeah, there are two bumbling comedy cops in this. Their scenes look like they've been taken from a completely different movie. Completely different. I mean, they're like, you know, it's like Dukes of Hazzard or something. It looks like it's come out of an old 70s comedy. And you've got this sheriff in there, this big guy, who may be the worst actor I've ever seen. Certainly up there. And I'm going to tell you something about this guy you won't believe a little bit later on. But and it just is, and their scenes go on forever, and it's him complaining about, oh, I haven't got enough cops, we don't have enough people here, just moaning. Then we go back to the island again, and we see the actual horror story playing out, and the music they use during the scenes with this guy, where it's all like it's really, and it seems like, I mean, I don't want to spoil. We're going to talk about the actual ending of the. I almost feel like they're two separate movies, really. But the end of the horror part of the movie, but the actual proper ending of this movie is about another 8 minutes or so of the cops again, just complaining, and then coming to the island and seeing sort of the aftermath of everything that's happened there. And then, you know, the film finishes with like this happy-go-lucky song, and it's like, are you actually serious? Like, you know, you had a sort of a chance to craft quite a suspenseful horror movie, and you totally ruined it. What on earth they were thinking with the scenes with the cops? I mean, in my opinion, the film should have ended, you know, on the island with some of the stuff that happens on the end there, and just, you know, ended in a very Friday the 13th kind of way. But this was, I thought that it took, especially the ending, I thought it took all the impact out of it.
It completely did. You've got this. I mean, we'll go back to the killing bit in the island in a sec. But you've got this old fat cop, just sort of, you know, probably never done any real police work in his life,
or acting.
Yeah, or acting. And there's this woman who's trying to find out what's going on. She's terrible as well, really bad, just shouting at him. And at one point he's like, yeah, the girl's going to be in hospital for a while. How long's she going to be in hospital for? I don't know, you know. And it's just awful dialogue between these two people. And then you're right, this other couple turn up. Where's this honeymoon island? And he starts fighting us, going, "Get out of here! You don't want to go there." And it's just like, I've never seen a horror movie end in this way. Okay, you know, it's not the best horror movie in the world anyway, but they usually end on this sort of, ooh, the killer might be still out there, no, or something. And this ends like a screwball 80s comedy.
Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. I mean, it is... It's one of those things where it makes a bad film even worse, you know. Like, the film itself would have been, you know, I thought was passably okay, you know. Nothing I would watch again. But while I was watching it, I was like, okay, and this is, you know, I like this a bit more than Home Sweet Home. It's got its problems and its flaws. But all the stuff with the comedy cops, I think takes it down, you know, right to the bottom of that barrel, Tom. You know, I think it could have been an obscure, certainly not a classic by any means, but an obscure sort of cheesy bit of fun that could have been worth watching. Maybe if they'd improved, tightened it up in a few areas here and there, it would have been, you know, sort of a decent, obscure, you know, little cheesy gem. But the scenes with the cops, I thought, were just... You know, and like I say, especially the ending. The ending's the time when you really want the horror of that situation to have the most impact, and they totally took that away from you. And it's comical in, you know, in that way, but but not quite in the way they wanted, I think. And especially the song during the end credits is like, it really is like we were watching a screwball comedy. That's through right. The whole thing. Yeah. And it was like, I can't believe I just watched a horror movie that ends like this, you know.
I know. Well, why don't we take a step back to the final sort of stretch on the island then? Because from memory, it starts with one of the characters, and I'm not even going to try and remember the names, but there's three couples who are having their honeymoons on the island. And then we have Elaine and Vic, who are the proprietors, the owners of this, you know, this resort, if you like. And one of the couples finds a body on the beach, and they come to speak to Vic and Elaine, and they say, "We found a body on the beach." And I don't know whether you picked up on this, but Elaine says to Vic, "They found a bottle on the beach." And I'm sure she says, "They found a bottle on the beach."
It's interesting you say this. I didn't pick up on it, but there was another time in the movie. Now, I'm not sure if I want to go back and watch it again just to see this, but there was a time where Vic speaks to Elaine and he calls her Emily.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. So I think, you know, I don't doubt you whatsoever that she probably did say that and they left it in.
So I think from then on, it ramps up to a degree. You know, the killer's running around, and by this point...
They found a bottle on the beach.
I actually rewound it and listened to it a couple of times, and I'm sure she says... And he's like, "We found a body on the beach." And she's like, "Vic, they found a bottle on the beach." So anyway, this is our final stretch, you know. We see that it's Frank out there. I can't remember at what point, but at some point we see that he's covered in burns that are made of papier-mâché, you know, but they made an effort to make him look like a horror killer. And he starts, you know, running around offing people, and there's a kill in a shower, which has got to be one of the least impactful kills I've ever seen in a horror movie. Yeah. He sort of taps her with an axe slightly, and then she's covered in blood, you know.
Yeah, and then when her boyfriend discovers her again, she's breathing. So,
yeah. But yeah, this is our last stretch with all the kills and stuff, so what do you think of this bit?
Well, you know, at least something was happening. I mean, the thing is, there is a lot of bluster going on in the second half of this movie where people just running around going, we're in danger. I know, but we can see the killer because sometimes they do quite a decent shot of just his eyes.
Yeah.
So I think it's a sort of decent shot, but it just takes forever to do anything. That's the problem, because you would think that the person he would be after mainly would be Elaine, because she's the one who allowed him to burn to death. But he takes his sweet time. I mean, he tries to wipe everybody else out first, you know, except his wife and her lover. And but eventually he comes in, like you say, and he's got an axe. And I thought it was a fairly decent axe to the head. He basically, you know, he axes Elaine in the head.
Yeah, that is probably, I think I said the other one was the best kill in the movie before, but that is probably the best kill in the movie.
Yeah, we don't see the actual sort of impact shot, if I remember rightly. It's more that you see the aftermath of it with the axe stuck in her head. But I thought that was sort of quite good. And then, Vic comes in and I think one of the boys has a shotgun and he shoots Frank, and Frank goes down. And but there was a hilarious moment to this that really did make me laugh, where Frank is basically, he's supposed to be dead. I mean, he's laying on the ground dead. And Vic comes in and he, obviously he's seen Elaine is dead and he's devastated and he's sort of kneeling down by her and kissing her hand. And all of a sudden Vic just gets up as if he was getting ready for bed and forgot to put his watch on the dresser. And he just gets up, throws a knife at Vic and then dies. Yeah. But it's the way that he actually gets back up. He literally gets up as if, it's like it's almost like Michael Myers getting up, it's like, oh, sorry there, forgot to put my watch on the dresser, throws a knife and then lays down and finally dies. It is, at least things ramped up a bit towards the end, which I liked.
Again, in the talking about this one, I kind of raises it slightly in my mind. If I had the time, I might give it another watch just to cement it a bit more in my mind, because it wasn't awful like Honeymoon Horror. I would never watch that again. But
Home Sweet Home.
Sorry, Home Sweet Home. Yeah.
See, they blur.
But it was sort of like someone trying to ape a Friday the 13th movie and getting a lot of it wrong. But they've had a good go and stuff like that. So I don't have bad will towards it. You know what I mean? It was a bad movie. Let's not mince words. But I had a bit of goodwill towards it, in that they were trying something, and some bits worked, some bits didn't.
Yeah, hard to disagree with you on that. It is, not a good movie at all. And like we say, I mean, it's low grade, bottom of the barrel stuff. But I do think they tried to sort of build up a fairly decent story. Unlike Home Sweet Home, where it's just, here's a laughing, maniacal, gurning killer. Let's just have him running around and picking off random people who have no characters, no personalities as such. Whereas this one, I think, tried a little bit more, set up that backstory at the very beginning of it. And unfortunately, just doesn't quite... Like I say, you need a bit of finesse, I think, when you're making a slasher, and you need to have the beats down. It doesn't quite have the beats down.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. But I walked away from it thinking, this isn't... I walked away from that particular scene. I really feel that the film should have ended on that scene. When he kills Elaine, then he kills Vic, and then end there. Yeah. But I can't pretend that the ending of it didn't make it lose a few points, because it really was like, wow. I mean, you just totally took the tone of this, went back to the comedy cops, and you sort of ruined it. I think ruined the ending of it. But I can't feel bad about this one. It is bad, but they were trying, and I have to give them credit for that. I mean, it's a very obscure film. This is one that has not even officially appeared on a DVD. You can only get it on VHS, or, like yourself, Tom, I'm sure you'll talk about it in a minute, a bootleg DVD. But it is, very rare and obscure. I'm sort of glad I saw it, really. Not one I ever would have, looked for, really, prior to, unless I was doing this show, really. And I'm glad I saw it, but it fails in a lot of areas. But I sort of had a bit. I wasn't as bored by it as you were, but it's fine. It's passably okay. So some potential there, I think, that wasn't quite realised.
Yeah, I think, when we look at that question, that is it that easy to make a slasher movie? Just get a bunch of people, just get a killer, just get a location. And I think you touched it on it, that you need some finesse. And I think these two movies show that people call Friday the 13th movies trash, and to a degree they are, but there is that level of finesse, even though they are a bit low rent, that these just don't have. So it's not just about getting all those elements together. There has got to be something more to it, and I think, if nothing else, these show that.
Okay, well, let me read you out some trivia, Tom. I know you're always dying to hear it.
I love the trivia.
Now, this is interesting, Tom. The only cast member who would go on to have any success after this film is Bill Pesci, who plays the rather unconvincing comedy sheriff here. His success was not in acting, however. This was his only acting role. I can't imagine why, Tom. But as a camera operator and cinematographer, he would go on to film scenes for movies such as Moonwalker, the Michael Jackson film, True Romance, and Alaska. So, yeah, he's a man who probably realised after he made this, he probably watched himself back and thought, this is not really cut out for this, but I sure do like running cameras. I think I'll do that instead. and seemed to have some success. This was the only acting role for almost all of the actors here, the exception being Bob Wagner, who played Vic, who did have a prior acting role some 10 years before in a film called No Drums, No Bugles. He has no listed credits after appearing in Honeymoon Horror. So that is interesting to me, that I think some of the acting in this is better than what we see in Home Sweet Home, and yet many of the actors here went on to do nothing else as far as we can tell. Perhaps they worked in theatre or something, but certainly as far as film projects go, this was the first and last thing they ever did. Both the director Harry Preston and the writer L.L. Carney did not go on to do any more film work, this being their one and only listed project.
Wow. It's interesting. I wonder whether someday, because like you said earlier, you can only get this on VHS. I bought it on DVD off a website, but it was a bootleg. Is someone going to pick this up one day? And we see stuff getting cleaned up and put on DVD. I wonder if anyone ever will, but I don't know, man. It's been a while, hasn't it?
I mean, it would surprise me if they didn't, but then you would have thought that a company, I can't really think, there's so many different companies out there, but you would have thought a company would have picked it up on DVD at the very least by now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just one of those films that's just so obscure that it's never really sort of caught on with people. It seems like, from what I was reading online, that generally I think somebody on a forum or something, I didn't really look into it very much, but someone in a forum was saying that they contacted the original distributor of this, and they were saying that they just wouldn't be able to make enough back in sales to warrant putting it on DVD. I think that's what I've read.
Right.
They just don't feel that this is a film that would particularly sell. And I guess I can understand that.
I can see that. I could see it being on one of those box sets of 100 movies for 20 or 30 quid or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All those sort of public domain films with a couple of others thrown in.
So I guess it's fair to say, really, that if you want a copy of this, you're just gonna have to hunt for it and either pick it up on VHS or find, a bootleg DVD like Tom did.
Yeah, and I don't advocate piracy, but at the end of the day, what are you going to do?
I do. Anyway, Tom, I think we're done with those. So there you go, 2 slashers, bottom of the barrel, low grade stuff. I think we're going to carry on this theme on next week's episode, but never mind about that for now. We still got more of the show to do. I think it's time for us to do some feedback. Alright, so first up, Tom, we have some audio from our good friend David Chicola, of course, who is husband of Brandy. They listen to our show, they're very loyal to us. They've been friends of yours for quite a while, and they're new friends to me.
Good. And they're also the presenters of the Dark Corner podcast at Gentleman's Grindhouse Records. Yeah,
now this particular piece of audio, David recorded for us. If you remember, those of you listening, I went on quite a bit of a rant on the last episode and talking about enthusiasm and sort of directing that at a particular person. And, Brandy sent me a very nice message, just basically saying that, she was sort of cheering, hooping and hollering when she was listening to it, and that she and David had listened to it together, and they sort of... Dave had this interesting reaction to it and wanted to sort of make this very intellectual point about enthusiasm, and I really like what he has to say here. So let's play this, and then we'll discuss that further. So here's the audio from Dave.
Hey there, Chris, Tom. It's DJ Evil Dave from over at the Dark Corner podcast, right here on Gentleman's Grindhouse Records, with a few lines about enthusiasm. Now, I minored in philosophy in my college days, and for some time, enthusiasm was a derogatory term, primarily because it is irrational. Going back to the original Greek, enthusiasm basically means being possessed by a god. Theo. Therefore, its primary meaning is to be filled with a Holy Spirit, which, according to philosophers like Voltaire, is very much contrary to irrational argument. So in regards to deontology, that is the belief in the existence of God, an enthusiast's argument is that God exists because one feels that God exists. There is no factual basis to support the existence of God, only an emotional or spiritual feeling. It's only in the recent centuries that the meaning of enthusiasm has grown to be more positive, primarily under Puritan use, especially American, where enthusiasm has come to mean excitement or ardor, but even its modern use, it's still irrational. I must admit, after your previous show, I'm with Chris on this one, in that for an honest review of the films under the Section 3 list, to be genuine, you must follow your personal thoughts and responses to whatever the film is. And you do address a film's cultural or historical impact, though that does not necessarily make it a good film. Good and bad in regards to art is purely subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. There are no facts when it comes to whether a film is good or bad. And if you are a subjectivist, you could argue whether there are facts at all. For as Nietzsche said, there are no facts, only the opinion of facts. Even those things we can measure objectively are interpreted subjectively. So in my opinion, the best way you can produce your show is to continue to be genuine in your personal subjective opinions on films. For enthusiasm, whether in its classic meaning or its more modern terms, cannot be faked. So with that said, I just want to tell you to keep doing what you do as you do it, and we fans will love you for it. Thanks, Tom and Chris. Bye.
Thank you, Dave. That was a very supportive message from Dave Giacola from the Dark Corner podcast. Now, if you listen to the last episode, you will know what that's about. And we don't want to drag this on or make a big deal out of it, because this is a show about having fun, talking about movies. We don't get too serious. But, last episode, someone had said something on Facebook that we both took offence at. And, while Chris might have been a bit more animated than me about it, I just want to reiterate that I completely support his comments and completely agree with them. The person who made those comments on Facebook, after listening to that episode, put another response on there and was quite apologetic to a degree, but then made a sort of closing comment that if we are putting opinions out there ourselves, then we should expect disagreement to come back to us as well. It's a two-way street. So they then subsequently deleted that message and all the original messages that our sort of conversation was about in the first place. And I think, okay, well, they've put that out there saying, we should expect disagreement to come back. But I think at the end of the day, that was the whole point of your rant, to call it that. In the first place, we have never, ever said that ours is the only opinion. We welcome disagreement. We welcome people giving different opinions. And that, that's the kind of fun of the show, if you like, you know what I mean? But it's all about how you do it. We're two guys who lead busy lives, who do a show for other people's enjoyment. We don't get paid for it. We actually end up losing money because of it with the hosting and so on. So we do this with a lot of goodwill. And the person who wrote those comments in the first place disagreed with our assessment of The Hills Have Eyes. Now, if his response had been, you know what, guys, I actually like The Hills Have Eyes, and this is why, then that would have been the end of it. You know what I mean? There never would have been that rant from Chris in the last episode. And that is our whole point. We do this with goodwill towards everyone else. And if people want to come back to us with different opinions on the film with the same goodwill that we put out there, then that's great. We enjoy that and we love that. It's when people come to us with things that are tonally quite different and come to us with, a tone that sort of is a bit demeaning and degrading, then that's where we have an issue. And that's what it was all about. So I don't want any listeners to feel that they can't disagree with us, because that was the whole point.
Yeah, look, let's look at it this way. If you break my rant on the last episode down into its component parts, what you're going to find there is me basically saying that we invite people to disagree with us when they have a differing point of view. However, if you do it in a condescending way, which is how Tom and I felt that particular person's comments came across, that is where we have to draw the line. Now, Tom and I are in our 30s. We're not teenagers anymore. We haven't got time to fight with people on the internet, really, at the end of the day. You know, we like Tom was saying, we lead very busy lives and we have things to do. And we do this show based on passion. We have to, you know. At the end of the day, we're not like one of the big, you know, really, really big horror podcasts, I'm sure, which, you know, get tons and tons and tons of listeners. You know, I mean, we haven't had an iTunes review since June. You know, it's like trying to get blood out of a stone, you know. And even though those reviews are, you know, they support us and they help us, at the end of the day, we just have to realise that you have to do this for passion, because the fruits that you get from it really, they're not, you know, for people like us anyway, they don't sort of tend to come in very much. I think my opinion has always been, I love hearing other people's views, but come to us in good spirits about it. You know, differ with us in a way that isn't you talking to us like we're naughty school children. That's how I felt that person was talking to us, so that's why I reacted the way I did. You know, so to say, you know, well, if you put an opinion out, then you should expect that somebody will differ in their opinion. But we know that. You know, I'm not an idiot. I understand that is what happens, and I enjoy, like I say, let me repeat that, I enjoy reading other people's views and opinions. Do you want to know how many things I disagree with, or things that my girlfriend and I disagree on? But we always have, you know, if we have a debate about something, we always do it in an interesting, intellectual and, you know, good-spirited way, to where we're not insulting each other, or I'm not talking down to her and she's not talking down to me. And that's the difference to me. That's where we have to draw the line, really. So I'm not going to go off on a big rant like I did on the last episode. And I feel like Tom summed a lot of that up very, very well. At the end of the day, please feel free. If you feel differently about, you know, both of these movies we've covered now, or, you know, perhaps a future one, or some of the ones back in the past, you're very welcome to disagree with us and tell us why you disagree. But if you do it in a way where it sounds like you're genuinely miffed at us because we didn't say the things that you wanted us to say, that's where we've drawn the line, you know. And it's a shame that we've probably lost a listener as a result of that. But like I said before, we have to draw the line somewhere, and that's where I draw it. But I do have to say that I really enjoyed listening to Dave's feedback, a really sort of intellectual and interesting. I mean, he's a very smart man, Dave. Not that I didn't think he was before, but especially listening to that. And it was interesting that what I had to say, which was really just sort of cobbled together on the fly on the last episode, the rant that I went on, was because I felt very passionate about that particular point. And for him to then have a sort of intellectual response to that, I thought was really fantastic. It was lovely to hear from him, and lovely to hear from Brandy as well. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that they're a part of the Gentleman's Grindhouse Records network as well, because they're good people to have around.
Absolutely. Good friends, good people, and thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. And Brandy as well. All right, so hopefully that's put that whole situation to bed now. This is a podcast about having fun. You know, some of the movies are crap, some of them are good. It doesn't matter. We're hoping to have a bit of fun with it. So anyway, shall we move on with some more feedback about the films that we've been discussing tonight?
We've got an email from Mike Hudson, who is Thunder Mike, who helped us out. He furnished us with a copy of Invasion of the Blood Farmers on the last episode. Nice guy. And he sent us an email for the very first time, which is awesome. So he says, "Hey guys, hope you're both doing well. Thought I would send in some feedback for the first time, as I've been listening since the start and not got around to it yet, especially since these are two films I have never even heard of, let alone seen."
Same here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Home Sweet Home, this got off to such a promising start with the two opening death scenes. How the cops didn't pull the killer over with blood all over his windscreen after hitting the old lady, I will never know. That's very true. I was thinking that this could be a fun slasher movie, and while there were bits I did like, ultimately I just found it a bit boring, which is actually annoying because it came so close to being a night in with mates and beer movie. I found the characters really unlikable, except for Jennifer and Angel, really? And I was looking forward to them all being killed after about the first 10 minutes. The dialogue was really bad, but I did find myself laughing at it, and the B-plot of the peas kept me going during the first 20 or so minutes until that death scene. I was sat watching this by myself and jumped and shouted yes when the killer elbow dropped the bonnet of the car, and I ran to the fridge and grabbed a beer. I was ready to watch for some crazy death scenes, but it didn't come. The fact that I could barely see what was happening during the stuff at night really didn't help, and ended up getting a bit bored by it. Even the crazy guitarist mime guy being electrocuted couldn't bring it back, although I did enjoy him trying to appease the killer by asking if he wanted a song or to see some magic. It's true, we didn't mention that. The final showdown between the killer, Jennifer, and her boyfriend was good, and I liked that despite the killer having tried to kill the boyfriend, Jennifer struggled with the fact that she had stabbed him. A lot of films brush over that as if it's nothing. I also enjoyed how the killer was just some crazy guy with a little backstory. We also don't need to know everything about them and why they are doing it. I mean, I do agree with that to some extent, but I do like a bit of backstory now, just something, you know. Honeymoon Horror was for me a much better film. I thought that this was a more effective slasher, but it did struggle a bit for an identity. The parts with the Sheriff John W. Pepper type character just kept pulling out what was at times a reasonably enjoyable slasher. The film did a decent job of raising the tension towards the last half hour, and the score helped with this, which I really enjoyed. I thought sort of throbbing sounds, that is the best way I could describe it, were particularly effective. The main set of characters were pretty likeable, except of course the main couple, who were just dickheads. And I don't know how that one guy expected to become Miss America with only 1 hour of working out a day. I have read Arnie's autobiography and I know how much work he put in. I'm starting to ramble now, so I will sign off by saying I did enjoy Honeymoon Horror more, but I think just some of the crazy moments of Home Sweet Home makes it more memorable. I've already shared that bonnet death scene to some of my friends. I probably won't watch either again, but it was a decent double bill of films for an evening. Anyway, keep up the great show. Anyway, keep up the great work with the show, and thanks for all the hard work you put in. It is always a highlight of my week. Cheers, Mike. Oh, and I totally agree with what you said about Invasion of the Blood Farmers. It definitely fits into that so bad it is good category of films like Plan 9. I just really enjoyed it, and I've watched it a couple of times already. Good on you, Mike. Yeah, there you go. See, I told you, if I ever found Invasion of the Blood Farmers in like an old DVD bin or something for £2, I would pick it up and watch it again. You know, it's so bad, but so sort of entertainingly bad that I can sort of see myself doing that as well.
Yeah. It's funny, again, he mentioned about, you know, who was left at the end of Honeymoon Horror, and it was just a load of dudes, wasn't it? Just a load of guys. There was no final girl, just like, you know, all the girls seemed to get offed, and there was a couple of guys there, a couple with moustaches, just all standing round. We forgot to mention the moustache work. In both movies, there were a couple of tasty 80s moustaches there. Yeah. We've let our listeners down on that one, but sorry guys, we won't let it happen again.
Okay, Tom, why don't you take us into the next bit of feedback we have? It's a piece of audio, isn't it, from an old friend?
From an old friend. We haven't heard from him for a couple of episodes, but that's fine. He's a busy man. But the fact that he took some time to watch these two, I think he deserves a medal. So let's listen to our old friend, Jim Moon.
Hello, gentlemen. Home Sweet Home and Honeymoon Horror. Now, I wasn't familiar before with either of these two early 80s slashers, and now, having watched them, I know bloody well why. Dear me. The slasher movie certainly came a long way from such ropey beginnings. Both movies take premises that would be later better exploited by other movies, and then completely manage to drop the ball into the gutter and then just sit watching as it rolls through some dog turds and finally right down the drain. I'm not sure which one I think is lousier. Probably Honeymoon Horror. Although, on its plus side, I did like the impressively burned Frank. Although I was equally somewhat discombobulated by the sudden outbreaks of disco at inopportune moments. Now, I have nothing against disco. It was just a bit weird, some of the scenes they choose to illustrate with some very dated and presumably copyright-free funky tunes. I think on the whole, although it is equally inept, I had more fun with Home Sweet Home. Partly because, early on, I decided that the maniac pumped-up killer must surely be the loved child of Lou Ferrigno and Andre the Giant. And it's not every slasher movie that has a member of the Kiss Army wandering around with his own mobile amplifier. On one hand, This character was so annoying, I couldn't wait to see him get bumped off. In fact, actually, that's true of all the characters in both films. They were definitely slashers where you're going, go on, kill the idiots, kill them. However, when our scary white-faced buffoon finally got electrocuted, I was actually a bit sorry. Really, they should have made him the final goon, and maybe gone for an axe versus axe duel at the end. Ah well, you can always dream. I did wonder how on earth these two films ended up on the Section 3 of the list, as really, there's nothing terribly outrageous in them, other than the sheer clumsiness of their making. You know, sometimes, when I look over these lists of banned films, I do sometimes wonder whether some titles got put on the list purely to protect hapless video shop patrons from some truly, truly crappy films. Gentlemen, I salute you on your mission, trolling the depths of the Section 3 list. You are truly heroes for undertaking this venture, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
All right, I think we're more or less on the same page, aren't we? You know, he talks about how they come a long way over time, the slasher movie, but these are pretty much the ones from the gutter, which they are, you know. Yeah. And, he says he thinks Honeymoon Horror is lousier, but I would actually go with Home Sweet Home. But at the end of the day, it's, there's not really that much in it, is there?
No, I think because maybe, I would hazard a guess that because there are some campier elements to Home Sweet Home that maybe he had more fun with that. Yeah. But he said he did. He thinks that the killer is a love child of Lou Ferrigno and Andre the Giant. And he thought like us, he thought the Kiss wannabe was annoying. But he felt sorry when he died. I didn't. I was quite happy to see Mistake go. It was a mistake to put him in the bloody movie. But that is an interesting thing. He wonders why these films ended up on the Section 3 list. And I wonder that too, because there's really nothing here in either film, I would say, that you think would qualify as a video nasty, really.
No, we've seen much worse on the Section 3 list. These are pretty tame by anyone's standards, I would imagine. But thanks, Jim. Always good to hear from you. And as we know, Jim is a very prolific podcaster. We've said in the past, one of the best. He's one of those people who takes podcasting to the next level, and he has actually got a Patreon at the moment to help fund his podcast, to help support it, keep the equipment going. And I think his ultimate goal possibly is to get to the point where he can do it full time. And you know what? If anyone deserves that, it's Jim. He is one of the best. So I don't have the link to hand as to what his Patreon is, but if you go onto Patreon and look for Hypnagoria, I'm sure you will find it.
Yeah, and do help him out. I mean, he does about 30 podcasts a week. He's this kind of guy who's just a content machine. And I always, unfortunately, I've sort of fallen quite I'm subscribed to everything he does, but I've just fallen quite behind on, on a lot of what he does. And I need to sort of catch up with a lot of it. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in there, coverage of old movies, new movies, and you can't go far wrong getting into Jim Moon. Just make sure you come back to us afterwards.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Jim. And next we have an email from Smodge. He sent some in last time, so shall I give this one a read?
Please do.
Morning, guys. As per Chris's request to present my feedback in a business manner, following the bullet point format of last time, please find attached my Honeymoon Horror feedback as a PowerPoint presentation.
No.
Only kidding. Honeymoon Horror from 1982 for me was a muddled up affair, and after searching online about the background behind the movie, which I guess you will touch upon, it explains why. Oh, did we touch upon that?
No, we didn't. I mean, it's interesting he says that. I don't go too deep because I haven't got time to do it, but I couldn't find anything about the background of the movie from what I look for. So, I'm guessing what he's saying there is based on the next paragraph that you're going to read. It seems like, well, read it anyway, and we can comment on it in a minute. But
for the most part, it is a poorly made, although serious slasher that comprises of bad acting, disposable characters, and kill scenes edited together with choppy jump cuts. Choppy jump cuts.
Choppy jump cuts.
It's just a funny sentence. However, all this is juxtaposed with scenes involving a sheriff and his deputy, which looked like they'd been shot by a different director for a different movie and inserted later to pad out the runtime, which seems to be the case.
Are you sure you're not on bloody PCP today, Tom? You giggly fool.
Sorry, choppy jump cuts.
Choppy jump cuts. That's what we should have called this show. Instead of the Strange and Deadly show, we should have called it Choppy Jump Cuts.
Oh, come on, get it together. All right, inserting them changed the tone and feel of the movie in parts, particularly the ending, by adding a sense of comic relief and bizarre soundtrack that was totally different from anything else. Smudge, if you have some information that says these were inserted later, then please elaborate, because that'd be quite interesting if these were inserted into it later on. I don't know. The two characters kind of reminded me of Roscoe and Cletus from the Dukes of Hazzard. Reading online, there is apparently a director's cut that removes their scenes completely. Where, you know?
Yeah.
You can only get it on like an old VHS. I mean, where would this director's cut exist? You know, if you can find it, then let us know and we won't watch it and review it.
It might be one of those weirdly sort of fabled things, like what was the film we were talking about a while back that had the Hills Have Eyes? Wes Craven had a much bloodier, sort of gorier cut of that movie, which ended up being was sort of lost somewhere in the ether. I think it was the Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
There are so many other bad points I could touch upon with this movie, but I'll keep it short and just mention one more: the dialogue. There are times it feels like a carry-on film with the double entendres and innuendo, and others where it goes randomly off track, like with the overuse of the term retard. Yeah, they do say that quite a bit. After all of the bad things I've just said about it, I kind of liked it. Well, I wasn't seeing that. I didn't see that coming. It had a certain charm, an opinion I'm guessing you'll disagree with. No, we don't disagree, to be honest. It was sort of almost there in a lot of ways with me, and Chris liked it a bit better than me. So yeah. And he says, keep up the good work, Smudge.
Yeah, I only liked it a little bit better than you. Let's not get that twisted. I mean, I would say that I wasn't quite as bored by it as you. But I mean, I think we see all the bad things that are in it.
Yeah.
But I just think it, has a little bit of, like Smod says, it's just got a certain charm to it that, I think it was an improvement over Home Sweet Home. I'm guessing that he didn't. No, in fact, we've got a bit that we didn't read out here anyway because it didn't make sense. But I think he was gonna review. He was gonna send us an email about Home Sweet Home as well, and it hadn't arrived for him. He was actually going to buy that movie. Good luck. But thanks very much, Smod. Nice to hear from you. Second episode in a row for him, I believe.
Good man.
That's brilliant. It's always nice to hear from people who've been listening for a while but have started writing in. We'd love more of that for sure. Now we've got some audio, Tom. Our last piece of audio from an old mate. He finally could be bothered to send some bloody feedback in, couldn't he? It's old Gore Blimey. Yeah, that's right. That's the man who practically nicked my name, my old internet nickname, Gore Boy. He was definitely influenced by me.
Yeah,
without a doubt. Right, so here's some audio from Gore Blimey.
Hi guys, Gore Blimey here. That's Gore Blimey, not Gore Boy. On Twitter as @doubleagent73. Just wanted to say I agree with all your comments about Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Not surprisingly, I really like that film. Gloriously inept and unintentionally funny, and how can anyone not enjoy a film featuring alien druid vampires who spray paint their eyebrows silver? My favourite part's the enormous dog that takes up half a double bed, who gets attacked by one of the vampires, and he sucks out so much blood the dog deflates to the size of a fluffy blood-stained mop head, and then seems to get reincarnated as a poodle thing at the end. There's the climactic scene with everyone on a hilltop flailing and waving their arms like Pan's people off their faces on acid, and best of all, the wonderfully filmed kiss sequence. Woman puckers up and moves into the camera lens. Man puckers up and moves into the camera lens. Camera pulls away and reveals druid vampire chewing a mouthful of dog. Superb stuff. Anyway, I had a chance to watch Home Sweet Home, and here are the notes I made. Well, we have a serial killer who's addicted to PCP and laughs like a comedy witch. Obviously, the mental asylum he escaped from had a very well-equipped gym. Either that or he's smuggling a load of balloon animals under his t-shirt. We know from the outset that he's really bad because he runs over an old lady crossing the road. Though, to be honest, I was more interested in why such a doddery old granny would be walking around in really high heels. We have a cutesy little girl who adds absolutely nothing to the plot. We also have her brother, who I think is meant to look like a Kiss fan, but actually just looks like Marcel Marceau, the mime artist. And I admit I was quite disappointed he didn't do that trapped in an invisible box thing. He spends the whole time on screen with a guitar around his neck, even when he's running and hiding from the killer. But more impressively, he's able to walk around playing it loudly without being plugged into the electric or an amp. I think he's meant to be the comic relief, going by the awkwardly unfunny one-liners and the silent movie-style mugging, but I just found him really irritating. The rest of the family characters I struggled with. They're all a bit samey, unmemorable and hard to tell apart, and it's quite hard to work out who's who and how they're connected. Some unremarkable man says to some unremarkable woman as she sits down with a child, "Jennifer, I never knew you'd make such a good mother." "Neither did I," she says, "but it feels so natural to care for a child." And then the killer arrives and they run off, abandoning the child, who later gets picked up by the police wandering in the highway. By the way, talking to the child, it seems the actress went on to appear in quite a big number of films, including the Hills Have Eyes remake from 2006. Anyway, by the hour point, the film seems to run out of steam a bit. Long, slow sequences that are meant to be tense, but they just felt drawn out and boring. And the dramatic climax sequence just didn't feel very exciting to me. And the very final surprise shot is almost embarrassingly predictable and cliched. The deaths aren't terrible, but aren't very special either. The car bonnet killing could have been pretty good, if the killer hadn't been squawking like a cartoon chicken as he slammed it down. Most of the characters are quite dull and interchangeable. There's nothing really new here. It's not well lit, so some scenes are a struggle to see what's happening. And the Incredible Hulk look-alike killer with his cackly laugh is laughably silly. Let's just say the enormous thing on the dining room table isn't the only turkey here. I'd be very surprised if this movie ever scared anyone. But I have to be honest, I quite liked it. It isn't quite on the same level of ridiculousness as Invasion of the Blood Farmers, but it still has a kind of daft charm. I'd probably watch it again. Anyway, that's my 2 pennyworth. Keep up the great work, guys. Bye for now.
Okay, Gore, thank you very much indeed. Well, first of all, he agrees with our views on Invasion of the Blood Farmers. He said in there, a particular line I liked, how can anyone not like a film where alien druid vampires spray paint their eyebrows silver? And, I find that quite difficult point to disagree with, really.
It's and I always like the way he starts his audio feedback, that it's Gore Blimey and not Gore Boy, because if he didn't, I would get the two of you totally mixed up, so thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. He just wants to be me, that's what it is, Tom. He's just envious. So he only watched Home Sweet Home. He didn't watch Honeymoon Horror. Thinks the killer laughs like a comedy witch. Like I said, he does, but I sort of view it as a bit more SpongeBob when he gets into the higher registers. Don't know why I thought of it that way. It just sort of made sense to me. Wonders why the old woman he runs over is wearing high heels, which I never noticed. So that's, picked up a detail I don't think either of us noticed.
No.
So he mentions here something that I talked about as well, which is Jennifer saying she's a natural mother, but then she runs off and leaves the child in the house with the killer. I mean, it is a massive oversight on the part of, I don't know, I was going to say the writer, only Mr. Bush, of course, wrote this, and Mr. Penis directed it. I couldn't resist, Tom. But that is one of the bits that made me laugh the most in that film.
It was. It was just a stupid bit of dialogue anyway. I think they were trying to add a bit of character to these two characterless people in it, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, and then they threw it away like about 5 minutes later. He wasn't fond of the climax, but he would watch the film again. I mean, that's what I find sort of interesting, really, is for some of the feedback we got, apart from maybe Jim Moon. It seems like for the most part, the people who wrote in about this, they seem to sort of find a bit of something sort of cheesy and charming about Home Sweet Home. I mean, it's not something that I would watch again, personally.
No, that's it. It's funny, people seem to slate it and then say, but I kind of liked it, which is fair enough, but it's not where I am particularly with it.
Okay, so not long now, folks, but we've still got a few little bits of feedback left. It's time to say aloha, or aloha rather, to Mr. Rob Maloha. Mm-hmm. And he says, aloha, Chris and Tom. Well, what a shocker last episode. Fancy changing your viewing order. Oh, and the little rant, which wasn't half as ranty as I expected. Really? Tom, you listened to that rant about 20 times. I think it was pretty ranty.
A little bit.
Yeah, it was well-founded, and I'm glad I could be used as a reference point for a differing opinion. Long may expressing your own views continue. When he's talking about changing the viewing order there, folks, by the way, is we're going to cover some zombie films instead of this one, and we decided to push the zombie episode down further in the schedule because it was a little bit closer to the last one we did, so that's what he means by that. You've picked some pretty obscure slashers this week, and it's easy to see why they stayed so obscure, as they don't add anything new to the genre. Neither film is as terribly made as Blood Farmers, although Honeymoon Horror had its moments. The woman in the shop was clearly reading her lines, and I nearly fell over laughing when the English maid started talking. God blimey, governor! And what was the point of the two cops? Is it obligatory to have a comedy cop side story in a rural American horror? Seems like it. It felt like the film came in 20 minutes too short, and they added the cops to flesh it out. The other problem was that most of the characters were pretty unlikable. The honeymoon couples were bearable stereotypes, but I didn't really care what happened to them. The sorority girls were too wooden to believe in, and Vic and Elaine quite frankly deserved each other. There was also no real mystery as to who the killer was, even though the film heavy-handedly tried to convince you it was the poor handyman. The way all the characters talked about him was quite shocking. By the end, I felt like I should be cheering on the killer. I'm probably going to be alone in my opinion here. I think you are, Rob, but I quite like the characters in Home Sweet Home. The house was full of quirky misfits, felt quite real, even though some of the characters were far-fetched, and I actually cared about them as they were being picked off. My goodness.
Wow.
You are an interesting and unique man, Mr. Rob. The killer worked for me too. No deception as to his origins or who's doing the killing, just a drugged-up, muscle-bound psycho. Okay, so it felt like they were being stalked by Lou Ferrigno, 70s Hulk, without the green makeup, but that in itself is pretty scary. I also have to say, folks, just as a slight aside, Lou Ferrigno is a horrible man. If you look up many convention stories of people who have met him, he is not a very nice man, including my own girlfriend who met him at a convention and he was horrible. So I think Lou Ferrigno himself is actually pretty scary even when he hasn't got the makeup on. I'm ashamed to admit that one moment made me jump, which doesn't happen often. It was towards the end when they were trying to get the little girl to go to another room and the Hulk jumped out. I watched the moment again and I think it was the actual fear of the girl as she clearly knew what was about to happen and genuinely didn't want to walk down the corridor. Poor kid. Out of these films, I could certainly see myself watching Home Sweet Home again. They both lacked in originality and bloodshed, but I quite like the people, killer and setting of Home Sweet Home. Keep up the good work. Cheers, Rob. And that's he's on Twitter at RobsLib, L-I-B. So yeah, Rob actually really seemed to like Home Sweet Home.
Wow.
Now, look here, folks. This is when somebody has an opinion that differs to ours, and because he's not being condescending but passionate about it, it's totally fine. I just wanted to, point that out as an example of sort of good differing opinion to our own. Because Tom and I, we didn't care for this movie at all. Rob happened to really like it. Yeah. I have to say the characters made no real impression on me, but they did on Rob.
And he said they were quite realistic in their way. So, Rob, say hello to the mime with an electric guitar who hangs around your house, and
Yep, and the woman, of course, the natural mother who decides to leave the child in the house with the killer and run off and save her own life.
Yeah, say hello to them both. Thanks, well, thanks for your feedback, Rob. Always appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, he always sends in, a good, lengthy email, and is somebody who's a big fan of film, like we always say about him. He's always posting about video nasties. He's going through all the nasties, you poor sod. So good luck to you, Rob, and I hope that you write in on the next one. We've got one final piece of feedback here, Tom. This is from Facebook. We don't cover Facebook comments very often, but this is somebody who I think is a loyal listener, and I don't, like I said on the last episode when I was doing my rant, I don't have anything to do with the Facebook side of things. I just am not really a Facebook guy, but what can you tell us about this one?
Well, this is from Amanda Rees. Amanda Rees, I don't know. Tell us how to pronounce your name, Amanda. I'm sorry for getting it so wrong. But she just gave us a quick bit of feedback after the last episode, and she said, "Loved this episode. I think you talked me into checking out Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Amanda, get some of your friends together, get some booze in if that's what you're into, and just enjoy it. I think you'll dig it."
Bit of PCP.
Yeah, and then go out and kill a load of people. Years ago, when I lived in LA, a revival film house was supposed to screen Farmers with Barn of the Naked Dead. Go on.
So no, I just love the title, Barn of the Naked Dead.
I brought my friend along thinking she would get a kick out of it, but when we got there, they told us the print for Farmers was a mess, so they pulled out their reels of Fulci's Gates of Hell.
Ooh.
My friend, who is a horror softie, watched the whole film between the fingers covering her eyes, but she enjoyed it, and Barn as well, because it's awesome. Anyway, Farmers has always eluded me, but it sounds like a lot of fun. Well, a little secret, Amanda, it was on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I just say, Tom, can I interject here?
Go on.
And I think you're going to agree with me. Fulci's Gates of Hell, one of my favourite films. City of the Living Dead, as it's also known.
Mm-hmm.
And much better than these two films and Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Big favourite of ours, I know.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the upcoming slasher podcasts, and I'm a big fan of Prom Night. I have a feeling I love it a bit more than you guys. I think I remember you both saying you weren't huge slasher fanatics. You know, I think where that might have come from is Chris Brown sent in some feedback once where he said he wasn't a big fan of slashers, so maybe she's getting us confused with him.
Yeah, no, we're both. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I've dedicated, a couple of years of my life to just tracking down slashers, so no, I'm a big fan of them.
I think when all is revealed, the whole thing is just so tragic. It's one of those movies where the killer's motives really work and add a little weight to the film. Plus, I love Wendy. Oh, she's talking about Prom Night. You know what? I've never seen Prom Night. So, yeah, I don't know what any of that is alluding to, but I look forward to checking it out next time.
I do. I've got the whole box set, Tom, of Prom Night and all its sequels.
Well, so have I. I've just never, ever watched it.
Oh, dear. Okay.
And she says, and oh my God, Home Sweet Home, insanity at its best. Okay, that's all. Just wanted to say I love the show and keep it up. Well, thank you, Amanda.
Insanity at its worst, you mean? But she's obviously a big fan of that. That's great. So we heard from somebody else who's new. Mm-hmm. And or when I say somebody who's just written in for the first time, but I think has been a fan of the show for a while, so that's brilliant. And she actually saw a screening of Invasion of the Blood Farmers. That's amazing to me. That such an obscure film.
Well, it was planned, wasn't it? Maybe we can get Chris Brown to do one of his screenings. That he does here in Liverpool, and do Invasion of the Blood Farmers, and just see the cinema go out of business because no one wants to go and watch it. But
I'll tell you what, though, it sounds pulling out their reels of Fulci Gates of Hell sounds bloody great to me. I'd love to see that film on the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you to everybody who wrote in or sent audio feedback. If you want to do so, you want to do the same as they did, you can, of course, email us at feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. If you want to send us audio feedback, you can certainly do. Just send us an MP3 file, ideally. Try not to make it over 4 minutes. If you can sort of cap it at about 4 minutes, that would be great. But yeah, do send us feedback. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/strangedeadly. No and in there. Tom, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at GrandhouseTom.
Yeah, and I'm on Twitter at TheGoreBoy. You can also find me on Instagram at instagram.com/TheChrisClayton. I just basically mostly post stuff on their new releases I've got and things like that. I bought a bunch of horror films lately. I bought some from the Shameless film sale that was on recently. A couple of Gialli that I've never seen before and I can't remember any of the names of. I think Who Saw Her Die is one, My Dear Killer is another, and Night Train Murders. There you go. So I bought a bunch of stuff recently. You can see photos of all that stuff. Not sure how exciting it is to just see somebody, taking a picture of the box of something, but there you go. If you want to see it, you can follow me there. And Tom, I wanted to at this point talk about a friend of ours, a friend of the show, Mr. Chris Ward. He has a new podcast that he does with a friend of his. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's with a gentleman on the other side of the pond called Myron Schmidt, and they've only got one episode out so far, but they're looking at the franchise side of horror. Something that we're both quite into, but we kind of shied away from with our own podcasting, isn't it? Because we didn't want to just be covering Friday the 13th and so on. But let's make it clear, that's just our personal preference. It's not that we mind other people doing it. In fact, we really enjoy other people doing it. And in their first episode, they look at Demons 1 and 2.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've listened to it. It was a good time. And so it's called Ancient Slumber, and you can find it on iTunes.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it yet, but Demons 1 and 2, two of my very favourites. So I can't wait to listen to it. And I love the name Ancient Slumber. It's just a great name, isn't it, really? Yeah, so do check that out. And that, folks, is the end of the show. But of course, we need to tell you what's going to be on the next episode. Now, just to let you know, unfortunately, fortunately in that I get to see family, but I've got some family flying in next week, so I won't be able to do the next scheduled show a fortnight from now. So it's going to be the week after. And Tom, why don't you tell everybody who's listening what the next episode is going to be about? We're continuing with the slasher theme, aren't we? We
are climbing a rung on the slasher ladder, hopefully, with, like I said, Prom Night and also The Prowler. And I think that was called Rosemary's Killer originally, but no one calls it Rosemary's Killer now.
No.
So yeah, a couple of sort of more middle ground slashers. So hopefully a bit better than this week's ones. But yeah, that's what we'll be looking at.
Yeah, so continuing with the slasher theme, really, really looking forward to doing that. Looking forward to revisiting Prom Night, as I haven't seen it for quite some time. And maybe, I don't know, I don't think you're going to have time to watch all the sequels, Tom, but maybe if I can remember anything about them, I'll, maybe discuss some of the sequels just very briefly.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That. Yeah, because they're quite interesting. So that's it, folks. So as I said, look out for the next episode to be a week after you would normally hear it. And until then, thank you very much for listening. If you can leave us a review or rating on iTunes, that would be great. Help support the show. And until the next episode, I've been Chris Clayton.
And I'm Tom Elliott.
And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.